Today's episode is brought to you by Dorrington Plumbing, Gas and Electrical, and they provide quality-focused specialists for both residential and commercial plumbing, gas and electrical services. They've been doing this since 1995 and have built up a substantial reputation within the sector. If you're interested in these services, head to www.dorringtonplumbing.com.au. So hello, I'm Ben Kostrich and this is the Market Bull podcast, and joining me on the show today is George Ventouras, the Executive Chairman of Thunderbird Resources, which is listed on the ASX under code THB. Now, I've spoken about Thunderbird last year and now it's had quite a substantial change, and one of those is George coming on board. So welcome back to the show, George.
Thanks, Ben. It's great to be here.
You've been involved since early this year, and since then you've probably doing a substantial amount of reading and due diligence and getting up to speed on what the company is. And now for those that are probably unfamiliar with some of the new changes and the projects that have come in, how do you best describe what Thunderbird Resources is?
Yeah, it's a great start. It's a really exciting position to be in, both myself and the company. Thunderbird's been around for a while. It's had different iterations of name, jurisdictions of exploration. I think it first listed on the ASX in the late 90s, so it has been kicking around for a number of years. But as you say, I came in earlier this year off the back of the acquisition of the New South Wales project that Thunderbird now is focused on. Prior to that, I had some really, and still have some really exciting, fascinating uranium tenure in the Athabasca Basin of Canada, which is a global hotspot for uranium exploration, as many people would know. The one thing that I didn't appreciate, I guess, before coming into this role was how expensive and how tricky exploration in Canada can be. Not saying it's impossible, because there's plenty of deposits, plenty of people and companies operating in that area, but for a junior explorer based in Australia, doing work on that side of the world
Is difficult.
And some of these holes that need to be drilled are, $1,000 a metre. Some of these deposits are over 1 kilometre deep. So numbers start racking up as far as exploration costs. Not to mention the winter season and how hard it is to get into the location. So it made perfect sense for the company to pivot for a couple of reasons. One is to operate in a jurisdiction closer to home that perhaps is somewhat more understandable, easier. We use the word tier one jurisdiction, but it is. So user-friendly, I call it. And then on top of that, we're looking at commodities which are in demand. It's been in conversation for at least 12 months, gold, antimony, silver even. So we're looking now at fantastic commodities in a fantastic location. And we might chat about this soon, but we've got fantastic neighbours who are exploring and who have discovered, and there are resources. So it's sort of, you go through and it ticks a lot of boxes for the company. The uranium projects aren't bad, just that being able to deal in an area and a cost base that's much more enjoyable to the board, the management, and I'm sure shareholders, just makes it more palatable.
It's a bit more approachable, and one of the biggest things is, the cost, but even the time zones. And we're speaking here in Perth, but it means travelling and going over there. And I remember when we'd spoken, when I spoke with George, the access was one of the biggest sort of things to consider. It was all helicopter, and it wasn't really like you just pull up in a car. But moving on from that, you touched on there a few of the resources in focus, which was gold, antimony, and potentially some silver.
Yes.
I think gold, we know a hell of a lot of what's been happening there and some of the price movements, and gold explorers and producers in Australia have reaped the benefits of that. But antimony is an interesting one. Now, that's one that last year had a substantial run, and even now into this year is still on the price behaving pretty well. But if someone hasn't seen that and go, what the heck is antimony? What is that, and why has it had such substantial pull and attention towards it over the last 18 months?
Yeah, I mean, antimony's been around for a while. It's been mined for many, many years, since probably late 1800s. So it's a known material. And I guess as technology increases, uses diversify and increase. So at the moment, the hotspots for antimony use are fire retardant materials, which are very important. Not so much clothing, but also building materials. And with new building codes coming up and many countries adopting those, it's become quite vital. Solar panels, so renewable energy, it's used in solar panels. Again, another burgeoning industry. And one which is of vital importance. We don't like to talk about it too much because of the ramifications of it, but it's munitions. And it's used as a hardening agent for projectiles. So unfortunately, there are wars, skirmishes, etc. Antimony is a key and critical metal for projectiles and munitions. And yeah, look, it has had a great run, and it was probably piqued the interest of a lot of people for a while, but it wasn't until trade wars took place late last year. China imposed some restrictions on export, and when you consider that China and Russia and companies like Tajikistan hold over 50% of the antimony market, then it becomes really quite volatile. It can be quite volatile, I should say. So China put some controls on the export of antimony. People were worried about the source and the supply of that, so prices went nuts. And, from early in 24, probably hovered around $8,000-9,000 a tonne. And we're punching, sort of high 50s into $60,000 a tonne. So
a substantial rise.
It's a huge increase. So there's price controls, there's supply controls, and people are looking for ulterior or other sources for this material, particularly the US. And we saw that backflip that Trump had on the tariffs. It was tariffed, then the tariffs were taken off or reduced substantially. So the US realises it's a critical material, short supply. We need to find it in safe places. So they're obviously looking in their backyard, but also allies such as Australia. And when you consider that one of our neighbours, Ventouras Resources, has a top 10 global deposit of antimony, and we border Ventouras Hillgrove deposit, things sort of, line up for our company, which is great.
Yeah, well, let's dive straight into that now. So these projects that you've acquired now with a focus on antimony are in New South Wales, and this was what you alluded to at the beginning, that you were more involved with that, and that's how you've been pulled into Thunderbird. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, the project was acquired in November last year. As we talked about, uranium is tough, so they were looking for another option for the company. Gold, antimony, tick those boxes. New South Wales was it. They acquired these projects. At the time, was about 500 square k's of tenure in northern New South Wales towards the coast, in the New England origin, they call it, in that area. So wildly exciting. There's a lot of focus. Ventouras Resources had acquired this project, and they acquired it over 12 months ago when the gold and antimony price was sort of getting a bit interesting, but hadn't really taken off. And then, as we sort of talked about the Chinese controls, they went nuts. The area has become a hotspot for exploration focus. There's a lot of companies in there. So there's really sort of this momentum building. I came into the company early in January with the goal to drive this acquisition through to various phases of exploration and hopefully at some stage a mineral resource. So, as I said, it's ticking boxes of, and I think I've come into the company at a pretty neat time where we've pivoted, and as junior explorers, the market expects us to pivot where we need to. So the company's pivoted away from Canada, away from uranium, into our home turf on some hot commodities. And my job now is to drive the company with this new project and increase value for everyone.
And talking about the land size and the potential sort of scope that you've got to work with, what sort of size dimension is this project? And one of the interesting bits, I can imagine there was probably historical work done, but maybe not through the lens of antimony at the time. And that's kind of a trend that we've seen, that there's been this historical work done, but everyone was looking for a particular resource, didn't see it, neglected everything else. So provide a bit of backstory and just scale to how big this project is in New South Wales.
Yeah, so when we acquired it, we had just over 500 or so square k's. Since the beginning of the year, we picked up another 115 square k's of tenure to the north at our Kookabookra project. But these areas have been mined and explored since the sort of 1870s, 1880s. At around that time, they knew about antimony. They knew it was there. They extracted a bit, but it was mostly for the gold and the silver and the other more common elements. So we've come into this tenement package, which was acquired from a private group. They saw the prospectivity of this area. They saw what Levada was doing, plus a smattering of other companies. Couldn't believe this ground was vacant, scooped it up. It was presented to the company, and we just obviously jumped at it.
Yeah.
But there was, and this is what's quite exciting, there was a huge amount of historical workings. And I don't know how they do it, but these old timers, the fact that they can scour this land and sniff out high grade whatever they're looking for is quite remarkable. And in those days, it would have been covered. A lot of the land wouldn't have been in commercial use. So they're having to scavenge through forest sort of ground to find this stuff. And it always amazes me, no matter where it is in the world, that these guys can find this stuff. It's quite incredible. So it's exciting for us because really they target high-grade material. And they only go so far in length or in depth. And when that high grade runs out, then they sort of, the interest wanes a bit and they move somewhere else. But it's like a starting point for us. And when we see these whole historical workings and bringing in new exploration methods, new technology, IT, and all the stuff that we've got now, which makes it not easy, but easier, it's opportunity and it's prospectivity. And those two words really sum up what we've got here in New South Wales.
Yeah, and I can imagine one of the big focuses now is literally that boots on ground and starting to map out some sort of methodical approach to evaluating this and building up some sort of resource, realistically, is the end goal. So currently what's been happening over the last handful of weeks and months, and in turn, what's looking like for the future for some of these prospects? Yeah,
so we've got just over 600 square k's of land that's really been underexplored. Certainly with no modern exploration techniques, and that's as I say, it's really exciting. In its life, there's been about 28, 29 holes drilled.
Not much for 600
three locations,
square meters,
600 square k's. Yeah. So there's not mineralogy everywhere, and what we're looking for isn't going to be everywhere. We acknowledge that, but it gives us scope, and when you look at the number of holes that were drilled and the depth, we're really quite shallow, probably average of about 50 or 60 metres. And now we can drill to how many hundreds of metres without an issue. It's opportunity. So since we acquired the project, there's a couple of things we had to do. First one was to analyse and collate all the historical information, of which there was
substantial,
quite a lot. So it took time to do that. And then in addition to that, and once we had all that information sorted out where we wanted it, to be able to understand sort of a hazy exploration pathway and know where we were going to focus in the first instance. Then it was about getting access on ground. So in New South Wales, we deal with landowners majority of the time. And the closer you are to regional cities like Armidale, which we are, or Glen Innes, there are more and more farmers who operate there. So you're dealing with 20, 30, 40, 50 people wanting to get access to their farmland, which is their livelihood. It takes time. And really, since the beginning of the year, we've been quite, not silent, but we've been just going slowly about our way, getting our access, getting our information, so that when we had critical mass of area to operate in, then we were able to hit the ground. And that's what we did. So, it probably took arguably 3 or 4 months, give or take, to get enough ground access to start in priority areas. So that's what we've done. We've gone for low-hanging fruit. We know there's historical occurrences, honing in on those areas, getting the access, starting boots on ground. So we've had 2 completed programs at the moment. One we reported on the ASX, which came out last week, which, for us, because there's so much historical work there and so many historical assay results, and those results are great. Above 70 grams a tonne of gold, 4,000 grams of silver and 18% antimony. As a starting point, it's like, oh my gosh, happy days. But what was important was for us to be able to confirm numbers in those areas so that we knew that, okay, this is real, let's move on. And that's what that first program did. So we were lucky enough, not quite 20 grams of gold at Kookabookra project. We had over 4% at Rockvale, which is the southern prospect, or southern project, I should say. And even some high silver numbers at over a couple hundred grams of silver. So it confirmed that it really confirmed our beliefs of what the potential is. And we've had a second round, some more rock chipping, some more soils, or the start of a soil program. And those are on the way to the lab or should be there now. And we're on ground now doing some more work. And every time we're on ground, we're not only looking at geology and taking samples, but we're also talking to landowners to broaden our access. We've got 600 square k's plus of ground. We're not here to find a couple thousand ounces. We're here to find millions. If it's there, we'll find it. I mean, I've often said before, we've got a project, we can't change the geology of what's in the ground, but if it's there, we'll find it. And you've got to have the signs that it's there, and we've got that.
And I mean, the Rockvale project, that's one of the, would you call it the flagship of this area, or are you how are you best evaluating all the priorities? And that's I guess that's what investors want to know, is where the main focus is going, which is in New South Wales. But again, you're within that tenure, there's a fair bit that you've got going on at the same time, and plenty of different areas to target based on the historical work.
Yeah, that's right. So I should probably explain there's two separate projects for this area, if you like.
Yeah.
So Kookabookra to the north and Rockvale to the south.
Yep.
And when we looked at the historics, in fact, there was a little bit of historical production at Kookabookra, probably around 3,000 ounces or so. So on today's prices, that's like $9 million, give or take $1 US. But we saw the numbers at Rockvale, high antimony, high gold, high silver. We thought, this is a cracker. This has got to be the focus. And it is, but we had a bit more access at Kookabookra with the landowners. So we spent a bit more time to the north. And from what we're seeing, both in historical workings, the geology, and some of the sample results that came out, the assay results, we're getting pretty excited about Kookabookra as a gold project.
Okay.
There's some sniffs of silver, there's some sniffs of antimony, and that's being flagged in historical reports. But as the guys are getting more and more on ground,
gold is becoming the real big
it's looking
signal.
it's fascinating, because across that area that we've got at Kookabookra, there seems to be quite a number of different styles of gold systems, or the potential for these systems. So to the west, we're looking something like an intrusive related gold system, which have the potential to hold millions of ounces. And we see that as something like De Grey's Hemi in the Pilbara with over 12 million ounces and counting, subject to a takeover, as we know. And as we move further to the east, we're seeing quartz veins, we're seeing orogenics, we're seeing disseminateds, we're seeing all these different styles of mineralisation. So it has the potential, given the size we've got and the historical production, we have the potential to have multiple types of gold systems. And we don't know until we start drilling and really getting into the nitty-gritty of what we're trying to do. But, I'd rather have that in spades than have no indicators.
Yeah.
Kookabookra gold, Rockvale with the numbers we got on the antimony, the silver, and also those sniffs of gold. There's a couple of prospects there, that we're getting pretty, the heart's pulsating a bit more about. So we're looking forward to getting on ground there. So these programs of ground reconnaissance fills in blanks for us, but ultimately, we're explorers, we need to drill, and that's what we'll be doing. And we hope, we'll get a rig spinning by mid to late July, which isn't very far away.
No, we're recording 27th of May. This will be on the cusp of June before we know it, and then July. So that's not really a far offshoot to think about. And with the new technology coming through, combining what has been done and some of the new age, are there particular techniques that the team is looking at utilising more so than others? I mean, I hear a lot of people talk about geophysics and its use cases, and then the various sort of drone work to paint the picture. And that's before, really, as you talked about, the crux is just drilling and getting a rig on site. But what considerations are going through the mind, as well as the team on ground, but some of these techniques?
Yeah, it's definitely something we're considering. You got to get the boots on ground and do that hack work. But all these other modern exploration techniques make life easier. So you're right, getting aeromags done, getting IP surveys done. We know that one of our neighbours just recently completed and announced an IP survey result. And it flags resistivity and chargeability of the ground and helps you identify mineralised systems and commodities. And from the results that they flagged, which we're kind of waiting for, it has the potential to show gold and antimony mineralisation. So given that result, that sort of tool in our tool belt goes from sort of mid-level to the top because we know now it works. So yeah, look, certainly we'll be looking at doing some airborne something, potential for some IP survey, just to really
hone in
on where these drill holes are going to go. But in saying that, with the last program we did and with the guys on ground now, we've already identified where we want to put some holes. There was some historical drilling at a couple of prospects at Kookabookra, as I said before, 50 metres. Some of those holes, quite a few of them ended in mineralisation, so it's open at depth, open at strike. So it makes sense to put some holes underneath those holes to see and test how far it goes. Yeah. And they were the areas of where we think it has the potential to be an intrusive related system. But, and then as we get further to the east and the forests become a bit more dense, we know it's underexplored. There's never been any drilling sort of east of where those original drill holes were. And we've got all these gold reefs that have identified on historical maps that are just lining up east to west, or west to east, I should say. So we're going to hone in on these historical workings. We know that they only go down a certain depth, and the mineralisation doesn't disappear. It's got to be at depth somewhere, and we just need to track it.
Far out. And you mentioned it again at the beginning about the notable companies in the area and this being a real hotbed of activity. Yeah. You can imagine there's a lot of neighbours and there's a lot of people, but talking about some of the names, who else is really having success in that area, which gives yourselves quite a bit of excitement knowing that, look, it's very easy to say that we're going to be the exact same as them, but there's so much activity happening. Resources typically accumulate and they do spread into various areas as well. But who are some of the other big players and what's been some of their success in the area that gives you confidence?
Yeah, I think probably the most notable ones that people might recognise are Ventouras Resources. Yeah. They picked up the Hillgrove project, which included not operation, but a plant. And they picked that up for about $7 or $8 million, just over 12 months or so ago. And it's sort of the planets aligned for them because they picked it up in hindsight relatively cheaply. It was a gold antimony project at Hillgrove, historical production, and those two commodities have gone nuts. So all of a sudden, and they've done their pre-fees and they've done all the studies, and from the information that we see, they anticipate being in production next year. So on today's prices, they've got 90,000 tonnes of antimony as a resource, and at $60,000 a tonne. Yeah, the project makes sense just on the antimony alone, let alone
the gold,
1 million ounces of gold. So to be, direct neighbours to Hillgrove is pretty fascinating for us. And when we look at the mineralisation and the geology of what's going on in that area, and some of the results from our first past ground reconnaissance, it appears that the mineralisation extends and we're along strike from the Hillgrove deposit. Until we drill some holes and test it, we don't know for sure, but where we see it going is directly onto our property, and it lines up with a prospect called Akel, where we had our high-grade antimony results from that first pass ground recon. So having them as a neighbour with that resource and soon-to-be operational plant,
very helpful.
It's a pathway for a lot of people. Yeah. So if we find 1 million ounces or 50,000 tonnes of antimony or whatever it might be, we've got a neighbour which will have an operational plant that it provides us with a pathway. So that's exciting. A little bit to the north, you've got Coonamberry Gold with their Enmore Gold project. They're getting over 100-metre intercepts at, anything between 0.8 and 1.5% gold. It seems like it's a reasonably large system. I don't believe there's a resource here yet, so it's slightly early days. But it's another compelling project right on our doorstep. And then in and around where we are, there's trig minerals, critical resources, lode resources. It's like a patchwork quilt, not of a massive amount of companies, but of quite a few companies in that area in and around Armidale. And we're all looking for those same commodities. But, we keep coming back to those historicals, but gold, antimony, silver, big numbers, big potential, great neighbours. Doesn't get much better.
Yeah. And that's one of the interesting fascinations is how timing is so important, but just where you're working in. And that's really at the beginning about the tier 1 jurisdiction of Australia. And yes, there's things happening in every country, but I can imagine that's a big tick. And when people talk about accessibility and the ability to get to these things, can you paint the picture of where and how accessible these things are? Because already one of the big advantages is you probably don't need to get there via helicopter because there's people with farms and various things. But what's the sort of accessibility and infrastructure like for these projects?
Yeah, it's excellent where we are. You've got Armidale's a major regional town, University of New England's there. So we've got, if and when we need it, a pipeline of geology students who we can funnel in. We've talked to the guys at the university, and they're happy to help us with research. They help us with the information, the background of the area. So, and with the major regional town comes logistics, transport. Armidale's about an hour or so out of Sydney. So to get there, and again, I like dealing in areas where you've got that access. So we can do a broker trip out of Sydney, have the guys fly into Armidale, run around the site, check out the geology, and be back in the pub by 4 o'clock and be in their bed that same night. So it's really handy for a number of different things: exploration, access to logistics and suppliers, and also to financial markets to get these guys who might invest in our company or other companies out on a day trip to see for themselves. And you don't really appreciate fully what these things and what these projects are like, how easy or difficult it is until you walk the ground. Yeah. And when you see it, you feel it, you experience it, smell it, you get a greater appreciation for a pathway to finding millions of ounces of something. It is really like a needle in a haystack, putting these drill holes down the ground with these drills which are like sticks of spaghetti, and you're trying to get them straight and you're trying to get them to where you think it's going to be. You've got to be lucky, to a certain extent. Having skilled technical team on board is one thing, and we've got that, and access to smart people, which we do. But ultimately, it also comes down to a bit of luck.
Yeah. And going forward, there's a team alongside you. I'm sure that team is potentially going to be likely staying the same. But for those that are unfamiliar with who's alongside you, who's part of that? What's their experience and what do they bring towards executing and developing this project?
Yeah, so we're a junior explorer and we don't like to make things big. Junior explorers, we don't earn money, we spend money. And when we have money, that money comes from our investors. So we need to be really careful about how we spend it. We don't want to waste it. We want the majority to go in the ground. So our board's small. We've got myself as exec chair. I'm on the corporate side. We've got Robin Wilson, who is our geologist, our exploration geologist, and our exploration manager. And he's got a raft of experience in uranium, gold, rare earths, which is where our projects are located. So he drives the technical side. We've got some young geos on board, and we've also got a couple of consulting firms that we tap into, one being Terra Resources, based in Perth, a huge amount of geophysical skill, and they've been helping us on the uranium in the past, but also in New South Wales. And they assisted with a lot of the review that was undertaken. And, as we build, then we just, gradually expand the team. The other person on the board's a guy called Gary Billingsley, based in Canada, decades of uranium experience. He's been key in that area for us. And whilst we still have those projects in the portfolio, he's a vital part of that machine.
All right. Yeah, and going forward, the tip on everyone's tongue is what's going to be coming next. It's going to be drilling and sort of results. But if you're looking forward, what would be some of the key announcements or things that investors should look forward to as we progress very quickly into that new financial year and realistically new strategy and new objectives? But what's on the top of the list?
Yeah, I probably should touch on a little bit as a precursor on the uranium side. So part of the news flow that is coming up is hopefully some announcements on divestment or joint venture on some of those projects. We've got 5 projects in that basin.
Yes.
From west to east. Some really interesting ground. We've got a prospect to the northwest of the basin that's got some really interesting uranium numbers, but also rock chips of copper above 60%. In the copper market, the way it's going, it's, if we had the money, the time and the support, we'd probably try and explore that as well, but we don't. But we're looking to bring some partners in to help us explore those areas. So that's something that the market should be aware of. And we've announced it before, so we're actively seeking partners to come in. So that'll form the basis of clearing up some residuals and getting some money spent on some of those projects. But for us, the focus within the company is on New South Wales. Some more groundwork to really just hone in on the areas that we want to drill, whilst working in the background on more access to cover our whole tenement package. As many ground programs as we can get over the next couple of months, given that we're coming into winter. I mean, Australian winters are pretty mild, but if it gets too wet, and we've had floods in New South Wales, so there's a little bit of juggling sometimes, getting on ground, doing some more work, some geophysics, that just highlights some areas for us. But as I said, drilling, if we can, mid to late July, we're putting permits in now with the New South Wales government to have access and get those approved. And then rolling on from there. And, with a bit of luck, we get some numbers in those first few holes or so, and then that will drive the next phase of exploration on those known prospects while we're still working in the background on the rest of it.
Yeah, there's a substantial amount of tasks and jobs on the horizon. And for investors that are interested in, realistically, nowadays, it's the day of the telephone. People just can call anyone really on the board and ask them questions. But how can people follow and stay in contact with the company and see what's going to be happening and really just reach out if they have any questions?
Yeah, sure. I mean, ASX is a good start. Everything that we do and we announce will go on their website, obviously, social media. We try and put things out as frequently as possible that are newsworthy, not just for our company, but our neighbours that form part of the big picture for everyone. But my ethos is that people put money and trust in our company. And if they've got a question, they just ring me. If you can hear it third hand, you can hear it second hand, but if you really want to know what's going on, and so long as there's no secret information I can't tell you at that time, I'll happily take a call from a shareholder that's got 1 share or 1 million shares, because it's just as important to each of those shareholders. So on previous announcements, you'll see my email address, my telephone number. I encourage anyone to give me a call. Happy to chat. I love talking about the company, the projects. It's exciting. I believe I've come into this scenario at the right time. And I'm really lucky. It's, the foundation was laid by the guys before me, George Bork, Robin Wilson. They did a lot of hard work, a lot of good work, and I'm just continuing that legacy.
Oh, I've sensed that the whole conversation, you've been quite excited about the prospectivity of this land and some of the targets and what's happening. So I really appreciate you coming back on the show, George, and I wish you all the best and the company, and I'm sure you'll be back in the room again soon to update on drilling results and all the additional information that comes to light. But thank you so much for speaking on the show today.
It's always great to talk about the company and the projects, and it is exciting because there's so much prospectivity, and that's what drives us day by day, and we get some returns for shareholders, so that's a good thing.
Thanks for listening to the Market Bull podcast. Please remember that the topics and stocks discussed in this podcast are not financial advice. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to like, share, and follow. You can follow the Market Bull on all our socials and keep up to date with global market insights.